Saturday has been waiting for
The
you all
message
week.
is ordinary. Can you book the table again? Your thumb stops above the screen. 3 months ago, you would have answered in seconds. You would have checked everyone's schedule, chosen the place, made the reservation, and sent the reminder without thinking much about it. Today, the same request feels heavier than it should. You remember the last cancellation, the deposit you covered, the person who arrived late, and the joke about how you are so good at organizing everything. Nothing in the message is openly rude. Still, irritation rises before you have decided what the moment means. You want to reply, "Why is it always me?" Instead, you type, "Sure." That small distance between what you feel and what you say is where resentment often begins to grow. Resentment rarely arrives as a dramatic announcement. It gathers inside ordinary agreements that continue after your willingness has changed. You keep doing what you once offered. Other people keep expecting what you repeatedly provided. Nobody names the change because you have not named it either. Then one small request carries the weight of every earlier moment. The anger seems sudden. The history beneath it is not. Before resentment becomes anger, you need to hear what it is trying to report. Not obey it blindly, not treat it as proof that everyone around you is selfish, not shame yourself for feeling it. Listen closely enough to discover what remains unfinished. Resentment can point toward unfair treatment, repeated disregard, an unspoken need, an agreement that no longer fits, or a responsibility you accepted without being honest about the cost. Sometimes several of those things are true at once. The feeling is information. It is not yet the final judgment. That distinction matters because resentment can make every recent event look like evidence for one painful conclusion. They ask for help, and you hear entitlement. They forget one detail, and you hear proof that you never matter. They enjoy what you arranged, and you notice only that nobody thanked you correctly. The feeling may be revealing a real pattern. It may also be mixing a current moment with months of silence. Your task is to separate them before the accumulated pressure chooses your words. Which form does resentment take most often in your life? Do you become irritated over small things, or do you become quiet and emotionally distant? Comment irritated if the feeling comes out sharply. Comment distant if you withdraw and hope someone notices. Both responses can hide the same sentence. Something about this arrangement no longer feels honest. That sentence is more useful than, "Everyone takes advantage of me." One describes a condition that can be examined. The other turns pain into a verdict before the full situation is clear. Return to the group of friends planning their monthly breakfast. At the beginning, organizing felt natural. You knew the neighborhood. You enjoyed finding places everyone would like. You were happy to make the first reservation. The second month, someone asked you to handle it again. You agreed because it was easy. By the fourth month, the role had become invisible. You checked dietary preferences, compared times, followed up with the person who never answered, and called the restaurant when the group size changed. Nobody formally assigned the job to you. Nobody formally released you from it either. The arrangement simply hardened around repetition. This is how many burdens become difficult to discuss. They were never created through one clear conversation, so there is no obvious conversation in which to change them. You volunteered once. Then you became the person who always does it. You listened during one difficult season. Then you became the person expected to answer every late call. You covered one shortage. Then your money became part of someone else's plan. You fixed one problem at work. Then every similar problem began arriving at your desk. Repeated generosity can slowly become an informal contract. The difficulty is that other people may be living by the contract while you are privately trying to cancel it. You become less available, but you do not explain why. You answer later, but insist nothing is wrong. You continue saying yes, but hope your tone communicates the no you cannot bring yourself to say. Now everyone is responding to your words, while you are reacting to what you hoped they would understand without words. That does not mean the burden is imaginary. It means the burden and the communication about the burden may be two different problems. Some people knowingly take more than they give. They notice your reluctance and push anyway. They punish limits, ignore clear requests, or treat your care as an obligation. In those relationships, resentment may be warning you that repeated conversations have not produced respect. But other people may not know the full cost because you have made the cost invisible. You say, "It is no trouble," while rearranging your entire afternoon. You say, "I do not mind," while keeping a private record of every sacrifice. You say, "Whatever works for everyone," then feel forgotten when nobody asks what works for you. The resentment is real, so is the missing information. This is one of the most uncomfortable parts of emotional honesty. You may have been treated unfairly, and you may also have helped the unfair arrangement continue by hiding your limit. Acknowledging your silence does not excuse another person's carelessness. It returns some power to you. If every problem belongs only to their character, your only choices are endurance or departure. When you also examine what you agreed to, avoided, implied, and never requested, another choice appears. You can make the hidden part visible. Resentment often contains an expectation that was never spoken aloud. I should not have to ask them to help. They should notice how tired I am. If they cared, they would offer. After everything I have done, they should know what I need. These expectations are understandable. Care includes attention. Mature relationships should not require one person to explain every obvious imbalance forever. There are moments when another person should notice. There are patterns so one-sided that pretending the problem is merely poor communication becomes another form of denial. But "they should know" can also keep you trapped. It asks another person to pass a test they may not realize they are taking. You keep giving, then watch to see whether they volunteer to relieve you. You refuse to ask directly because the unprompted offer would feel more meaningful. When it does not come, the disappointment seems to reveal how little you matter. Sometimes it does reveal a lack of care. Sometimes it reveals a difference in awareness, habit, capacity, or assumptions. You cannot know which one you are facing until the expectation becomes a conversation. That is why resentment should be translated before it is expressed. Raw resentment says, "You never think about anyone but yourself." Translated resentment may say, "I have been handling this alone for months, and I need the responsibility to be shared." Raw resentment says, "Nobody ever shows up for me." Translated resentment may say, "I keep offering support, but I rarely ask for it clearly. I need to make one specific request and watch what happens." Raw resentment says, "I am done caring." Translated resentment may say, "I am tired of giving in a form I can no longer sustain." Translation does not weaken the truth. It removes the smoke so you can see where the heat is coming from. Many people wait too long because resentment feels morally embarrassing. You want to be generous, loyal, patient, and mature. Resentment seems to contradict the person you believe you should be, so you hide it. You become extra pleasant while your inner language grows harsher. You perform kindness in the room, then criticize everyone after leaving. You agree to the favor, then secretly hope it becomes difficult enough that the other person finally understands what they asked of you. You are not proud of these thoughts, so you push them down. But feelings that cannot enter honest language often find less honest exits. Sarcasm. Delayed replies meant to create worry. Doing the task badly so nobody asks again. Mentioning old sacrifices during an unrelated disagreement. Withholding warmth while insisting everything is fine. Resentment can turn ordinary communication into indirect punishment. The person receiving it may feel the coldness without understanding the charge against them. Then they become defensive. You see their defensiveness as further evidence that they do not care. The relationship begins fighting about tone while the original burden remains unnamed. This is why speaking earlier is an act of care. Not only care for yourself, care for the relationship's chance to respond before bitterness becomes its main language. There is a difference between a complaint and a disclosure. A complaint often throws the whole accumulated history at another person at once. You always leave everything to me. You never notice anything. I am tired of being the only responsible person here. A disclosure makes the pattern visible without turning the other person into a complete explanation for your pain. I have been taking responsibility for most of the planning. I agreed to it before, but I am becoming resentful, and I need us to change how we divide it. That sentence may feel vulnerable because it admits something you wanted the other person to discover on their own. It also admits that your agreement has changed. A past yes does not require a permanent yes. You are allowed to renegotiate ordinary arrangements when your capacity, circumstances, or understanding changes. Renegotiation is not betrayal. It is how honest relationships remain current. Without it, people keep relating to an older version of your availability. They think the system still works because the visible parts still function. You are the only one hearing the strain inside it. At the next breakfast, one friend arrives 20 minutes late. Normally, you would smile, say it is fine, and spend the meal making small remarks about how difficult reservations are. This time, you notice the temptation to use irritation as a substitute for clarity. You do not embarrass them in front of everyone. You also do not tell yourself the lateness means nothing when it affected the booking. Later you say, when the time changes after I have made the reservation, I end up managing the restaurant and the group. Next month, I need someone else to organize. The friend looks surprised. I did not know you hated doing it. You almost answer, you should have known. Instead, you choose the more accurate truth. I did enjoy it at first. I kept doing it after it stopped feeling good, and I did not say that clearly. That response does not erase their responsibility to be considerate. It does prevent the conversation from becoming a trial about who failed to read whose mind. Now the relationship has useful information. What happens next matters. A caring person may feel embarrassed, ask questions, or need a moment to adjust. They may not respond perfectly in the first minute. Look for movement rather than flawless language. Do they share the task? Do they remember the new agreement? Do they become curious about the burden you were carrying? Do they make room for your changed capacity without treating it as a personal rejection? Those responses help resentment soften because reality is changing. But suppose they laugh. You are making this into a big deal. You are better at planning anyway. Suppose they agree. Then hand the responsibility back to you every month. Suppose your request becomes evidence that you are difficult, dramatic, or no longer fun. Then the resentment has delivered different information. The problem is no longer only that the arrangement was unspoken. You have spoken. Now you are learning what the relationship does with your honesty. This is where a limit may need action behind it. You stop making the reservation. You attend when someone else plans, or you accept that the gathering may not happen as often. You do not sabotage the group to prove your importance. You simply stop performing the responsibility you clearly said you could no longer carry. That may create inconvenience. Inconvenience is not the same as cruelty. A system built around one person's silent overfunctioning will feel less smooth when that person steps back. The roughness does not automatically mean the change was wrong. It may be the first time the true amount of work becomes visible. Notice what resentment does when you refuse to translate it. It begins counting. You remember who called first, who paid last time, who asked about your day, who forgot your birthday, who received more patience, and who offered less help. Some counting is necessary. Patterns matter. Reciprocity should not be measured by pretending every relationship is equal when one person is always depleted. But scorekeeping becomes corrosive when every act of care is secretly entered into an account the other person does not know exists. You give without naming your limit, then expect the exact emotional return that would make the giving feel safe. When the return differs, the gift changes meaning in your memory. Now it feels stolen. This can happen because you were exploited. It can also happen because your yes contained an unspoken condition. I will do this, and then you will prove I matter by doing the same for me. There is nothing wrong with wanting reciprocity. The problem is expecting an invisible bargain to produce a visible result. Healthy care can include requests, limits, and honest preferences. It does not have to disguise every need as generosity. Before we continue, notice what you most often keep score of: time, money, emotional support, household work, or effort. Comment one word. The category you count most closely may reveal the place where your giving and your honesty have become separated. There is another reason resentment becomes difficult to release. It can protect you from grief. Anger feels active. It gives you a case to build. It keeps your attention on what the other person should have done differently. Underneath, there may be a quieter realization. You stayed in a role longer than you wanted. You hoped someone would notice without being asked. You gave from love, fear, habit, and the wish to be valued, all mixed together. You may need to grieve that the care you offered did not create the closeness you expected. You may need to accept that some people appreciated the help but never understood the meaning you attached to it. You may need to admit that a relationship is less mutual than you wanted to believe. Resentment can postpone those conclusions by keeping you busy with prosecution. That does not make the feeling false. It means the feeling may be guarding a loss. Ask gently, what am I afraid I will have to accept if I stop being angry? Perhaps the answer is that you must ask directly and risk hearing no. Perhaps you must reduce your effort and discover the relationship becomes quieter. Perhaps you must admit the other person cannot offer what you keep trying to earn. Perhaps you must forgive a smaller failure instead of turning it into proof of every old wound. Different situations require different courage. Resentment cannot decide which one belongs to you. It can only tell you that the current arrangement needs attention. Use a simple practice before the next difficult conversation. Take one sheet of paper and write the event without interpretation. They asked me to organize the gathering again. My partner left the household task unfinished for the third time. My colleague sent the problem to me after I had already said my workload was full. Facts give your mind a stable place to begin. Under that, complete this sentence. What I have not said clearly is, maybe you have not said that the role is exhausting you. Maybe you have not said that you expect the money to be repaid by a specific date. Maybe you have said it repeatedly, and the unsaid truth is that you are no longer willing to continue without change. Then write. The reasonable request or limit is, keep it observable. Please take responsibility for the next two plans. I need us to divide these 3 household tasks differently. I cannot take another assignment until one of my current deadlines moves. Finally, write, what I will do if nothing changes is, this is not a threat. It is the part of the decision that belongs to you. You may stop volunteering. You may change the amount of access you offer. You may involve a manager, mediator, counselor, or another appropriate source of support. You may decide the issue is small enough to release after one honest conversation. The purpose is to move from private accusation to clear information and responsible action. Do not begin with the most volatile or unsafe relationship in your life. Practice where direct communication is reasonably safe. If there is intimidation, coercion, abuse, discrimination, financial danger, or concern for your safety, ordinary motivational advice is not enough. Seek appropriate professional, legal, workplace, or trusted support for the situation. Resentment should not be used to pressure you into a confrontation that could place you at risk. It should also not be used as permission to humiliate someone. Public exposure, calculated silence, revenge, and emotional punishment may create a moment of satisfaction while leaving the real need. The goal is not to make another person feel the exact weight you carried. The goal is to stop carrying it in a form that keeps damaging you. Sometimes the honest conversation reveals that you were missing part of the story. The friend who stopped helping may be overwhelmed by a family problem they had not shared. The partner who seems careless may believe they are contributing in another way you have not recognized. The colleague may not know the assignment keeps being redirected to you. New information does not automatically cancel your limit. It may change the tone, the solution, or the amount of responsibility each person can reasonably hold. Maturity allows two truths to remain present. You were carrying too much. They may not have intended the full effect. Intent matters. Impact matters too. Honest repair makes room for both without forcing either one to disappear. At the following month's breakfast, someone else chooses the restaurant. The reservation is later than you prefer. The place is noisier. One person forgets to confirm the final number. You notice an unexpected urge to take control again. Resentment was not the only thing attached to the role. The role also gave you certainty, recognition, and protection from disappointment. If you handled everything, you did not have to depend on anyone else's effort. Releasing a burden may require tolerating another person's imperfect way of carrying it. This is a part people rarely discuss. You cannot ask for shared responsibility and then correct every detail until the task returns to you. You can communicate what genuinely matters. You can also allow harmless differences. The table is not the one you would have chosen. The message goes out later. The system becomes less polished. But you are sitting with the group instead of managing the group. That change may feel unfamiliar before it feels peaceful. You begin to see resentment with greater precision. Sometimes it tells you a boundary was crossed. Sometimes it says, I agreed before checking myself. Sometimes it says, I asked clearly and nothing changed. Sometimes it says, I want another person to repay a sacrifice they never agreed to receive. Sometimes it says, I am grieving what this relationship cannot become. These messages require different responses. One may need a request. One may need accountability. One may need a smaller offer. One may need acceptance. One may need distance. Wisdom is not pretending every resentment has the same cause. It is refusing to let the feeling remain so vague that anger becomes its only language. As you practice this, your relationships become less dependent on mind reading. Your yes becomes more current. Your no arrives before contempt. Your requests become specific enough to answer. Your generosity stops carrying secret conditions. You notice unfairness earlier, while there is still room for a conversation. You also become easier to know. Not easier to use, easier to know. People no longer have to interpret your kindness while guessing where the limit lives. They can hear what you enjoy giving, what you need shared, what has changed, and what you will no longer pretend is sustainable. Some relationships will improve because the hidden strain finally has language. Some will resist because the old arrangement served them. Some will reveal that both people were waiting for the other to begin an honest conversation. You cannot control which response arrives. You can stop requiring resentment to speak on your behalf. Remember the first message. Can you handle the booking again? The request was small. Your reaction was carrying months of unnamed history. This time, you do not send the automatic yes. You answer, I have organized the last few gatherings. I would like someone else to handle this one. No accusation, no list of every past disappointment, no promise to do it anyway if nobody volunteers. The group becomes quiet for a moment. Then someone says, I can do it. Perhaps that simple response arrives. Perhaps it does not. Either way, you have stopped asking anger to reveal a truth you are now willing to say clearly. That is the shift. You do not become a person who never feels resentment. You become a person who notices it before it hardens into identity. You examine the pattern without turning every person into an enemy. You take responsibility for the truth you withheld without accepting responsibility for another person's repeated disregard. You ask before you accuse. You act when asking changes nothing. You allow care to include information about your limits. Resentment loses some of its power when your life no longer depends on silent agreements. You stop collecting evidence in private while performing peace in public. You stop waiting until bitterness makes honesty feel justified. You speak while your voice can still carry care. If you are ready to translate resentment before it becomes anger, comment, "I will say it sooner." Subscribe for more original lessons on protecting your dignity without turning pain into punishment. Because once you hear what resentment is asking for, the next challenge is saying what you need without feeling demanding, weak, or ashamed.